Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, desde donde sea que nos escuchen, nuestros podescuchas de Contraelite. Estamos aquí dándole inicio a la tercera temporada de Contraelite. Es increíble que ya vamos por nuestra tercera temporada de este podcast que nació antes de la pandemia, cuando no teníamos ni idea de qué iba a pasar en el futuro, pero bueno, aquí vamos, aquí seguimos y como siempre tenemos excelentes invitados y excelentes temas. Entonces, el día de hoy tenemos a Silvia Foti, quien vamos a hablar un poquito más de ella. Sin embargo, el día de hoy vamos a hacer el programa en inglés, aunque vamos a pedirle aquí a Silvia, porque Silvia también habla español, que nos salude aquí a la audiencia y luego pasamos con Jorge y que para que él salude y luego les lea un poquito más en inglés acerca de Silvia. Silvia, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, Vanessa, estoy bien, estoy muy encantada de estar aquí con ustedes y es un tema muy interesante.
Buenísimo, gracias por estar aquí, Jorge.
Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches a todos nuestros podescuchas y bueno, esperemos que también nos activemos en la parte del video para que también nos veas y tengamos una interacción mucho más directa con toda nuestra audiencia. Y sí, como mencionaste, muy contentos de esta tercera temporada, ya más de 50 episodios donde hemos estado abarcando todos los temas y hay tantos temas de interés que hay que seguir explorando en este 2022 y muy contento y especialmente con nuestra invitada de hoy, Silvia Foti. Va a ser espectacular y creo que uno de los programas más únicos de esta nueva temporada, por eso estamos bautizando esta temporada con su tema. Hello, Silvia. Great that you could join us.
Hello, Jorge. It's so nice to be here.
Hello,
okay,
everyone.
So great. So would you like to introduce our guest, please, Vanessa?
Yes, absolutely. So, okay, I have Silvia's bio here. Silvia Foti. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing very well your name.
Contraelite.
There you go. Silvia Contraelite is a journalist, creative writer, teacher, and mother. She has a master's degrees in journalism, education, and creative nonfiction. She has been a journalist for 20 years, and she has published 2 mystery novels, and she has been a high school English teacher since 2007. So she has her master's in journalism from Northwestern University, has extensive experience in writing nonfiction, and has written for several publications, including Chicago Tribune, Chicago Parent, LA Parent, Buenos Aires Herald, Argentine News, and actually one of her articles won an award from Chicago Parent magazine for best feature. And then she lived in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and then afterwards she returned to Chicago and then did so many different things that we invite you to read her entire bio at silviafoti.com/bio. And so, you know, another thing that you should know, she speaks English, Lithuanian, and Spanish fluently. She is, you know, really impressive, and we are so excited to have her here. And Jorge can also...
And she is the granddaughter of General Storm, one of the biggest Lithuanian heroes from the 20th century, and her story, her research is just so incredibly amazing, and I'm very honored that she decided to join us, where she can tell us more about it and we can explore this topic. So yeah, General Las Vetra. And yes, it's really, they have streets named after him, roads, schools. So he's a legend. He's a legend in Lithuania. And her research and her family story is very impressive, very, in a way, it sounds like an epic. So I really would like to ask you, I know you said it in different interviews while researching for this program, but I would really like to hear how did you, because she also has a book. The book is called Granddaughter of Nazi Collaborator, or can you tell us the
yeah,
name?
The title is The Nazi's Granddaughter.
Nazi's
How
granddaughter.
I discovered my grandfather was a war criminal.
Exactly. So with that powerful title and controversial title, could you please tell us your story for those of our audience that don't know? How do you arrive? I mean, you were this Lithuanian immigrant in Chicago, and then you heard this story from your mom, from your anuke, your grandma, and then what happened?
Well, I was born in Chicago. I didn't immigrate here. Two Lithuanian parents. My parents immigrated here, World War II. So I grew up in Chicago, 1960s, Market Park, very Lithuanian neighborhood. I was raised with the Lithuanian language and went to kindergarten, not able to speak English because that's what a lot of Lithuanian families did. So I only started to talk English at kindergarten. Grew up very proud of my Lithuanian heritage and had heard so much about my grandfather, Jonas Noreika, whose code name became General Storm. So I can give a little background of the heroism that I heard as I grew up and what I thought I was going to write, and then kind of transition into how I learned about this whole other hidden side of him that nobody had ever told me about. So I always heard his story backwards. He died in 1947 in a KGB prison, shot twice in the head, executed by the KGB. He had been in that prison for about 2 years, tortured, interrogated. And the reason he was captured by the KGB was because he was trying to lead a big rebellion against the Soviet Union. He was trying to unite all the partisans in Lithuania and get them to fight against communism in the Soviet Union so that Lithuania would be free. So it was a failed rebellion. It never really got off the ground. It was only in the planning stages. But he got caught. He was betrayed by somebody and then brought into that KGB prison. So he died a martyr for Lithuania's freedom. And it was during this time that he called himself General Storm. He was only a captain in the army, but because he was trying to lead this rebellion, he called himself General Storm or Generolas Vėtra. So before that, he was in a Nazi concentration camp for 2 years. And I was told that it was because he tried to save Jews. And before that, he was the sort of like the governor of Šiauliai during the Nazi occupation. And from 1941 to 1943, so for about 2 years. And again, I was told he tried to save Jews during this period, and he tried to help Lithuanians as much as possible. And he was kind of working as a double agent, for the Lithuanians and the Nazis. And then before that, he led this 5-day uprising against the Soviets in 1941, June 1941. It was this 5-day uprising that he led in the northwestern part of the country, and they won. So before that, he was a lawyer, he was in the army, he was a prolific writer, creative writer. So I really grew up just looking up to him as my own personal hero. I decided to become a writer in part, inspired by him. Decided to become a journalist in part, inspired by him. Was considered myself a very patriotic Lithuanian, also inspired by him. So that's kind of like the heroic side of Jonas Noreika that I think most Lithuanians knew. And that's why he had a school named after him. He had some streets named after him. He's got this plaque on a very famous building in Vilnius that has been in the news. So that's sort of the heroic side.
So what was the turning point? Like, when did you start realizing that something was off?
So in the year 2000, my mom was dying. She was only 60 years old, and she had been working on a book about her father for nearly 40 years. So I grew up always seeing her talk about this book that she was asked to write by the Lithuanian community here in Chicago. But in the year 2000, she sort of died. It was an unexpected thing, but she had called me over to her bed and said, Silvia, you have to write the book. And of course, I knew what book she was talking about. And at the time, I was a full-time journalist. Now I'm a high school teacher. But, you know, I said yes, because there's only one thing you can say to your mother at that point. And that literally was the last day of her consciousness, because the next day I came back, she was in a coma and then had died within 2 weeks after that. Then another little part of the story is that my grandmother, her mother, survived her by 5 months. And then she was dying, and she was on her deathbed in July. And she calls me to her bedside and says, Silvia, how's the book? And I am thinking I'm giving her words of comfort. And I said, Muchita, everything's fine. You know, I'm working on this book. I'm only 38 years old, and I'm not going to let it go the way Mom did. I'm a journalist. You know, I'm going to really get this done. And I thought I was giving her words of assurance. And then she says, don't write the book. Just let history lie. And there's no need to dig around. And I still did not know about his involvement in the Holocaust. And I thought she was just trying to give me a pass because my mom had been a little stressed out over this. And I thought she was just trying to, you know, eliminate some stress in my life. And so that's what I thought. And I said, no, Muchita, I have to do it. You know, I promised Mom, don't you worry, I'm going to get it done. So she rolls over in bed and faces the wall. And that was the end of that conversation. And then she died shortly after that. So both my mom and my grandmother wanted to be buried in Lithuania. They wanted to go back to the homeland. And so my brother, who lives in California, and I took their cremains to Vilnius. And then they were had a big funeral there. President Landsbergis showed up to this funeral in honor of General Vetra and, you know, his wife and daughter. And we were so honored that he came. And
interrupt you. If I remember correctly, you were awarded the highest order of Vytis, the
yes.
highest decoration of Lithuania.
Yeah, my grandfather in 1997, thank you for reminding me. Yeah, in 1997, 3 years before Mom died, my brother, Mom, and I went to Vilnius, and she received this Cross of the Vytis, which is the highest honor for, you know, on behalf of her father, which is the highest honor anyone can receive posthumously, and President Brazauskas had given it to her. So that was a big accolade for him too. So anyway, we're back in Vilnius, the year 2000 now. Funeral is ending, and my brother and I were taken to see, it's just a few blocks away from the cathedral where the funeral was held, to this Academy of Sciences building, which is the Wróblewski Library now. And they had just hung up, like days before, a plaque to my grandfather on that building, because in that building, he worked as a lawyer while he was trying to organize this big uprising against the Soviet Union in 1945. And so 45, 46. So that plaque is up. So we see the plaque, we put some flowers there. And then after that, we were invited to visit the school named after my grandfather, the Jonas Noreika Grammar School in Šikoniai, where he was born. So we drive to the school, And when we arrive, the children, you know, have flowers and they're singing wonderful little Lithuanian songs, and we're greeted very grandly. And then we were brought into the director's office, and he had these scrapbooks of my grandfather because there were just article after article after article written about him. And, you know, I'm kind of looking at the scrapbook, and then the director says, "Oh, I heard you're writing this book about your grandfather, that you took the project over from your mother." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You're such a good daughter. It's so important that our country have its heroes." And I said, "Thank you." And then I said, "You know, as long as I'm here, why don't you tell me the story of how you named the school after my grandfather? I had never heard of it. Maybe, you know, it can be part of the book now." And he says, "Well, you know, before we had this horrible Russian name, because Lithuania was occupied by the Soviet Union until 1990 after World War II, and we wanted to get rid of that horrible Russian name. And we wanted to give it a good Lithuanian patriotic name. And your grandfather was born here in this town, and he's such a magnificent hero that it was just a natural to name the school after him." And I thought, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But then he pulls me to the side and he says, "But you know, I got a lot of grief over naming the school after your grandfather." And I said, "Grief from who?" And he says, "The Jews." And I said, "What could the Jews possibly say about my wonderful, magnificent, legendary grandfather whom I love so much?" And he looks at me, you know, like I'm, you know, not aware. He said it in such a way as if it's such common knowledge. He said, "Well, he was accused of killing Jews." And that was the first time I ever heard that in my entire life. And I was completely unprepared for hearing this. And
Wow.
it really felt like a punch in the gut, you know, and I had to sit down and, you know, kind of collect myself again. And remember, I'm still grieving the loss of my mom and my grandmother. So it's like I'm not in, you know, this really strong emotional state. And so then he says, "But don't worry, that's all in the past. It's not true. It's just communist propaganda." So anyway, but the problem is I had heard this. And once you hear something like that, you can never unhear it. And so
Right. Like where would that idea even come from? You know,
so I have a question
yeah.
about that, and thank you again. And I just really bad. I mean, it's just also I would like to offer my condolences, you know, back in time, because you said just two deaths in a short time span. It must have been really tough for you. So really, just your moral courage and strength is really impressive. But I mean, how do you feel when he said that? Did you believe it? Did you thought it was communist propaganda, or you kind of had an intuition about something wrong?
Well, I didn't know what to believe. You know, it's the first time I heard it, and it was such a shock to me that I didn't know what to make of it. I mean, I guess I was relieved when he said it's not true. But, you know, then I came home to Chicago and I started talking to like my father and, you know, other people here in Chicago. And I'm like, "Have you ever heard this crazy story about Jonas Noreika being accused of killing Jews?" And like, "Yeah, we heard it." And I'm like, "What do you mean you heard it? How come nobody ever told me this?" And they said, "It's just communist propaganda. It's not true. Why would we talk about something that's not true?" So, you know, being a good Lithuanian in Chicago, I kind of went along with all that, or wanted to go along with that. And so I sort of went into the denial mode of it. And, but I was still processing it and still in shock over the fact that there was even this rumor about, I was calling it a rumor then. And, you know, to kind of, I had no deadline for the story. You know, I had young children to raise. I was a full-time journalist. This was totally a side project. And I kind of came up with the strategy to just look into my grandfather's heroism first, because I have 3 bookshelves of material on my grandfather that I brought over from my mom's house. And I had a big task ahead of me just to understand like this heroic side of him. So I spent the next few years just kind of going through that. He wrote 77 letters from the Stutthof concentration camp to my grandmother. At the bottom of these letters, he wrote a little fairy tale to my mother from this camp. Then I had those KGB transcripts. Say what you will about the KGB, they record everything. And so I had 3,000 pages of these KGB transcripts that my mom had translated into Lithuanian, so I could read the Lithuanian version. And just, you know, all these articles and magazine articles and newspaper articles. So I spent many years kind of on the side, just kind of going through all that. But in the back of my head, I always still had this, what am I going to do about this rumor? You know, because I'm a journalist, I knew I couldn't just completely ignore it. So I finally got kind of the emotional strength to tell myself that, okay, I'm gonna look into this Nazi occupation period, but my goal is to exonerate my grandfather, and I'm gonna put this rumor to rest once and for all. So that's kind of how I began to approach it. That was my strategy.
You wanted to find the truth.
I did. I wanted to find the truth, but I also wanted to, I mean, I was really sincerely hoping that he was innocent of killing Jews. And so I started looking into this Nazi occupation. And one funny thing I noticed is that my mom's archive was like 95% all about the Soviet Union occupation. And she had hardly anything on the Nazi occupation. So I thought that was interesting. And then I did start looking into Jewish sources, and I saw that the Jews really had written quite a bit about the Nazi occupation in Lithuania. And their version was that Lithuanians played quite a large role in killing Jews. Whereas the Lithuanian version is that it was all done by the German, you know, by the Nazis, and Lithuanians had nothing to do with it, and they were kind of just standing by, wringing their hands, powerless. So that's the Lithuanian version. So anyway, right about that time, I came across this document written by my grandfather called Pakelk Galva Lietuve, or Raise Your Head Lithuanian. And it's on my website. But you know, when I started reading it, I was thinking I'm going to read like this patriotic little booklet about how wonderful it is to be Lithuanian, because Lithuanians tend to write that way. And so as I was reading it, though, I was really shocked to see that it was a very anti-Semitic piece of literature. You know, it's calling about...
In some of your interviews, I even heard you refer to it as a Lithuanian Mein Kampf.
Yes, it's a little Lithuanian Mein Kampf. He's calling for the boycott of all Jewish businesses, and not to purchase anything created by Jews. And he's calling for all Lithuanians to only support Lithuanians and to buy from Lithuanians. So this is kind of his message in this. And you know, when I finished reading,
and I'm sorry, maybe Vanessa wants to jump in, but it's just what you're saying. It's just so powerful, and just people who are aware of Lithuania. It's just a very nice country and very nice people and friendly. But I think there are many secrets or parts of their history that they haven't dealt with properly, and especially in terms of justice. But kind of playing the devil's advocate here, don't you think this Lithuania Raise Your Head was kind of like a product of this time, 1932? Most people in Europe probably were anti-Semitic. And I mean, just taking it back to my own country, Venezuela, I just recently realized that there was this Evian conference in France where Hitler basically was saying, you know, I have a problem with these Jews. I want to get rid of them, you know, or else I will kill them. I mean, not like that, but he was saying that. So there was this big conference, Evian conference in France, and they were asking many countries, who wants to take Jewish refugees? And ashamed to say that only it was like probably Dominican Republic who wanted to take Jewish refugees, but most of countries in the world didn't want, even Venezuela didn't want to take any Jewish refugees back then. And he was like, see, nobody wants them, so who cares about them, you know? And that was, I'm ashamed, even countries like Venezuela, you know, by omission, let that happen. So again, don't you think that book had to do with you know, the mood in Europe was basically, we hate the Jews, nobody wants them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he drank the Kool-Aid of the time. That was it. And everybody, it seems like most people were anti-Semitic, and I think it was very common. And, you know, he wrote it in 1933, and I was already I had one tiny, you know, glimmer of hope that he didn't call for the killing of Jews in this booklet. So I thought, you know, as bad as it is in today's, you know, time period, looking at it back into 1933, as bad as it is, it's still not calling for the killing of Jews. But he wrote it, he was the author. It's not like he just read something. Like when you write something yourself, you feel very strongly about something. And so, and his name is right on there. And you can see he has no love for Jews. I mean, that much you can see. So I could see sort of the hatred he had for Jews in his own heart, and what he's asking other Lithuanians to do as far as marginalizing them and narrowing their lives. So, it still was not the final straw for me yet. The final straw came when I came across this other document that's in this book called Masinės žudynės Lietuvoje, or Mass Slaughter in Lithuania. And this was written in the 1970s, and it came out by a Jewish publisher, but it collected Holocaust documents from Lithuania. And there were a couple of documents from Šiauliai, where my grandfather was this governor. And this is the thing that really finally turned me around and made me believe that I have to completely look into this and take this extremely seriously. So on August 22nd, 1941, my grandfather called for the rounding up of all Jews and half-Jews in the Šiauliai region, and asking them to go to Žagarė, where he wants a new ghetto created. And they need to be there within 1 week, by August 29th. And this document, you know, explains what they can take with them, which is like very little, how much money they can take, which is also very little, maybe like one little tiny suitcase each. And within this document, he's already kind of planning what should be done with their property. So then, you know, after they were brought to this ghetto, within 6 weeks on Yom Kippur, they were all slaughtered, these 2,000 Jews.
Oh my God.
Families, babies, grandparents, all slaughtered. So this is the thing that turned me around finally. Yeah. And this is where I could no longer ignore it. And, you know, in Lithuania, there's a big denial over this document. But because I'm American and a journalist, I took it very seriously as a primary source document, that there's no getting around this.
In this moment, did you feel any, I mean, you still writing the book probably at this time?
Jorge,
you were finding this out.
Wait. You're like cutting out really bad.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to turn off your video really quick and then ask the question again.
I think he was asking how I felt, so maybe I'll just work off that. until he can.
Yeah, because I think I don't know if his connection dropped or something, but okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll just edit this part.
Yes.
So in this moment, were you in the process of still writing the book, or you already?
Yeah, this was like 2010. So like I was about 10 years in at this point. And after this, I decided to really focus on the Nazi occupation and really find out what was going on with my grandfather during that time. And by 2013, I was able to go to Lithuania and conduct my own research. And by this point, I was pretty convinced about his role, and I just wanted to find as much evidence as I could. And I was there for 7 weeks. By this point, I switched my career from being a full-time journalist to going into teaching high school, because as a full-time journalist, I had no time to work on the story. I was writing for everybody else, and nobody was paying me to write the story, and I couldn't pay my bills with the story. So, so somebody suggested that I should become a teacher so I could have my summers off. And that's what I did. I became a high school teacher to write this book so I could have my summers off. And it worked. It was a good strategy. And so I finally had 10 uninterrupted weeks to really, really dig into this. And that's what I did. And so when I went to Lithuania, though,
when you were in Lithuania, was it relatively hard to find out the truth, or you have to really go into some secret archives and, you know, police were not letting you in, or don't look at that, or was it pretty easy?
I didn't think it was that hard. I think that once you wanted to, the hardest part for me was the psychological breakthrough of believing that he's really involved. And now I just have to find the evidence to put my case together, because the book is essentially like an argument, you know. And I wanted to provide the context for what was happening at the time. I wanted to kind of recreate what he was doing at the time. I wanted to paint the picture of what was happening with the Jews at the time. So I really worked at creating a narrative. It's a memoir. The book is a memoir. So I really wanted to create, you know, this narrative of what was going on in a way that would draw people into the story. And my strategy was not to make it like this academic historical thing that, you know, could be a little dry and boring, because I knew that I know how Lithuanians think. And I knew that the only way to sort of chip at some of this denial is to get them involved in a story that was interesting to read. So I worked very hard at making it that way. But once I was in Lithuania, you know, I mean, there were some logistics I had to figure out and all that, but once I was there, it was not that hard to find this information. It's there. It's just, how do you view it? Do you believe it or not? And most Lithuanians, you know, like let's just take this document that he wrote on August 22nd, 1941. At the official level, the government of Lithuania has said that he had no idea what a ghetto was, that he was just sending the Jews there to save them, you know, or that he didn't really understand what kind of document he was signing. So it's like they can look at it, they can look at the evidence, which is very damaging, and make a million excuses for them. Another example I have is I actually interviewed the director of the Genocide Center while I was there that summer. It was at that point it was Teresa Borowskaite. Now it's like 3 other ones later. Now it's someone else later.
And they have a new one. They have a new one this year, I think. And he was making some comments also about you, that they're going to try to keep an open mind. I actually was surprised that the current Prime Minister, Ingrida Shimonite, she is one of those few voices, anyway, when she was a candidate for Prime Minister. I don't know what she thinks about now, but that she thinks that this story should be thought of with like an open mind, that I don't know. It was kind of interesting to see that her mind back then changed. I don't know what she thinks about now, but the fact that she's thinking like that back then, or that there is a new director from the Genocide Center, which anybody who has visited Lithuania or the Baltic states know that these institutions are very close-minded. They're guarding this official narrative very secret. You cannot question anything. And especially if you even have some question about the Soviet Union role, or basically you don't exist. They're very hermetic and vertical. So I think when you were interviewing, what was your impression?
So when I was interviewing Teresa Borowskaite, I asked her, about this document from August 22nd, 1941. I'm like, what do you think about this document that he signed? Like, how can the country of Lithuania still regard him as a hero after he signed this document sending so many Jews to their death? And her response, I thought was very strange, to an American's ears, but it's very indicative of how Lithuanians were thinking. She said that nobody knew what was in his heart as he was signing this document. And when she said that, I was like, I know, like, what? This, like I'm not in Kansas anymore. Where am I?
Yeah.
So, I just thought, you don't get to, like, when you sign a document, like, you don't get to say how you felt. Like, your signature is what you felt. So,
like, you're literally endorsing it. Like, you are signing off on what, like, I don't think that there is any clearer affirmation of your feeling, unless, if it had been, sometimes, people, it's not in their language, whatever. And because I'm a translator and interpreter, I encounter these issues where people sign things and they don't know what they're signing. But like, this is not, no, this is, people know, like, you're literally signing off on this. So
right.
What? That must have been
Right.
so strange you don't know what's in his heart. What?
I mean, we could get away with a lot. Like, you're driving on the highway drunk and you don't mean to hit anyone, but you're drunk,
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, no.
So, yeah, so I thought it was a very strange answer. And I just kind of walked away, kind of shaking my head over it. And I thought, okay, this is how, and this was a very official person. So I just really started to have a sense of what I was facing as far as their denial goes. Like, it's one thing for the granddaughter to be in denial because you're a family member, but it's a whole other thing when it's like the country is doing this. So so I really began to have a strong sense of the wall of denial that really was very pervasive. And so, other things that I discovered there were that my grandfather was involved in 3 cities, in Plungė, in Telšiai, and in Šiauliai. And the 3 cities are like an hour.
Our audience, these are cities in the northern Lithuania. So just for people to have a map.
Yeah. They're in northern Lithuania, and they're really not more than an hour apart. Like from Plungė to Šiauliai, you can almost get there like within the hour. It's not that much time by car. And he led that 5-day uprising from Plungė. He was the leader of Žemaitija during this uprising, and he did it from Plungė. And I write about this extensively in my book. But I was talking to the last witness of that uprising. He was 17 at the time. And when I was interviewing him in 2013, he was in his 90s and he already passed away like in 2015, 16. All my sources are dead almost by this point. So it was really urgent that I get there in 2013. But anyway, I would say, what about these 2,000 Jews who were killed in Plungė while my grandfather was the leader of this uprising from Plungė? That was his headquarters. And Jonas would say, he had no idea what was going on. He didn't know what was happening. The men were acting independently. And I'm like, how can you be the leader, you know, this military leader, and have your men act independently? Like, that made no sense to me either. And then another story he would make is, oh, well, he was in Telšiai while the Jews in Plunga were getting killed. So he had no idea, you know, he wasn't even there in Plunga when it was happening. And I'm like, well, you know, a person can like leave an order and then leave the city, you know, to get something done. But you know, he was just also part of the denial machine as far as everything goes. And I go through all this in the story to kind of show, I thought he was a very good character to show sort of the personification of denial and exactly how that works. So what I wanted to say is that 2,000 Jews were killed in Plunga, 2,000 Jews were killed in Telšiai, 4,000 Jews were killed in the Šiauliai region. So that's a minimum of 8,000 and a maximum of 15,000 if you actually want to count the city of Šiauliai. But there's a little back and forth that the mayor of Šiauliai gets credit for the Jews in Šiauliai. But my grandfather was the governor who was above the mayor. So it just depends on how you want to count it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Wow, that's incredible. And like what you're saying, the denial machine, just like it takes a lot of people to keep this secret, you know, from anything being ruffled too much and people not really wanting to deal with that kind of reality. So in your research, did you find, like, as you were looking into all of this, Lithuanians at that time, do you think that they had anti-Semitic tendencies worse than the Nazis at that time? Like just the regular Lithuanian who was not Jewish?
In 1941?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were anti-Semitic. The problem is that the Nazi propaganda machine had convinced every single Lithuanian that all the Jews were communists and that they were the enemy. And to complicate it further, right before the Nazis came in, the Soviets were sending a lot of Lithuanians to Siberia. And so almost every Lithuanian family had somebody affected by this. And so the tensions and the anger, you know, and the distress was so high that by the time the Nazis came in and said that every single Jew was the enemy, the communist, the Lithuanians really believed that. And they used that as their sort of official excuse to allow the genocide to happen. Like, I do believe that there's a great deal of anti-Semitism underneath it, but they had that like little thin layer on top that was just enough official sort of reason to say, they're the enemy, they're the communists, okay, we get to kill them. But all of that was fed by like this really deep, centuries-old anti-Semitism underneath it.
But that doesn't make sense, I guess, for a foreigner like me, that Vilnius was like Jerusalem of the North. There were so many Jewish there for centuries. So how does that change so fast in that time? Just because Nazi Germany and okay, yeah, now is our time. Let's just exterminate them.
Yeah, well, Vilnius had been under Poland actually for so many years, and when the Soviet Union came in and took over in 1940, they got Vilnius and offered it to Lithuania back, and this was kind of part of the deal that allowed the Soviet Union to come in 1940 without any kind of bloodbath. But so that's one little level of it. But yeah, they you know, the Holocaust would not have happened without the Nazis. That is true. The Nazis and their propaganda machine, and Hitler is at the top of this genocide machine. And Lithuanians have a very funny way of saying that only the Žydšaudis, the Jew shooter, is the guilty one. And what I have learned is that there was this whole genocide machine. You know, after Hitler, there was the provisional government that called for the cleansing of Jews. After that, there was like, you know, the Lithuanian activist front that got involved in finding the Jews and killing the Jews. They were very anti-Semitic. Then there were just a lot of average Lithuanians helping by identifying the Jews, then bringing them to either the ghetto or some central location, and then guarding them. And then, you know, after that, the very last person was the Jew shooter. And that person typically was uneducated. They had to often bribe these guys, like with a bottle of vodka or something, to get to just do it. And they gave them some food. Everybody was hungry. And so Lithuanians only blamed that last person, but really that last person was just the last step in the killing of the Jews, because so many other people had to help to get that Jew standing in front of a pit so that the Jew could be shot. I mean, I'm sorry to be talking so crudely, but this is what angers me about Lithuanians is like, well, he wasn't a Jew shooter. He didn't personally kill the Jews. And I'm like, Hitler didn't personally kill a Jew either. So is he off the hook?
No, and now that you mentioned that, I think it's a great segue just to play devil's advocate again, that I'm sure after you research published the book, you probably got a lot of, I don't know, fan mail, hate mail, controversy. I think it was a big scandal in Lithuania. But while doing research for this program, I came across this article by Vytautas Sinica. And basically he's saying that you're wrong, that he doesn't glorify, Lithuania doesn't glorify Nazi. Jonas Noreika was not really a Nazi because he was not affiliated in Germany with the party. So that's wrong from your side. And that you didn't know what was in his heart, that the commander of the town in Plunge was Povilas Alimas, not Jonas Noreika.
You're fading out, Jorge.
Your audio cut up. No, Jorge. No te escucho. I can't hear you. Hello. ¿Me oyes?
Hello?
Como
I don't know what was.
The last like 20 seconds we cut out.
It's a pity. I don't know until what you heard.
I heard that Povilas Alima.
Yes,
that was the last thing I heard.
So yeah, and just this list of details that basically saying that you've taken things out of context, that the ghettos were not really bad, it was just a place of organization, and he couldn't possibly know the consequences. So basically, I just wanted to hear what you had to say about that, and is it just ludicrous, or you were open to certain interpretations?
Well, you know, nobody was there in 1941 today. So I did all this based on my own research. And my book, you know, on one level is an argument, but I think I make a very strong argument. The fact that he wasn't a Nazi, that's true. He was not an official card-carrying member of the Nazi party. And I was not happy with the book's title. This is something my publisher chose. And I kind of pushed back against it, saying that I'm a Nazi collaborator's granddaughter, but they didn't think it sounded as good. And so, but their argument was that, you know, the word Nazi today has its meaning has stretched. I mean, today, really, everybody calls each other Nazi, like if they don't like each other. And so the connotation of the word is just somebody you don't like. But in my grandfather's case, he worked for the Nazis willingly. He willingly worked for them. He had the highest position a Lithuanian could have under a Nazi in the Šiauliai region. His family lived in style. They had the best house, like the governor's mansion at the time. And he was getting 1,000 Reichsmarks a month on top of it. There was no gun to his head. He was willingly working for them. He was very young. He was only 30, 31 years old. The guy before him was in his 50s. He was asked to keep his position, but he stepped down. And, you know, my guess is a man in his 50s is usually wiser than a man in his 30s. And so I think the guy in his 50s kind of knew what he was going to be getting into. And my grandfather, though, was very anti-Semitic, and he had just come off of having 2,000 Jews killed in Plungya from that. So, so yes, he was not, you know, in the Nazi Party officially, and he did not wear the uniform. That's true. He didn't wear the pin, whatever, but he did participate in killing Jews, and that is the worst part of being a Nazi. I mean, objectively speaking, the Nazi uniform is kind of good looking, you know, like who cares about that? But the fact that they're killing Jews, that's the horrible part of being a Nazi. That's the only horrible part of being a Nazi.
Exactly. No, and I think it's just, and I will just turn it over to Vanessa after this. I think it's just such a pity that, I don't know, part of the society, or especially the political elites, they just have a hard time recognizes this. And I even went, I think it was 2015, to this Panere memorial just outside of Vilnius. And I was just shocked because I had no idea that actually happened, you know, and it was like officially 20,000, but it was just how the site looked. Of course, no Lithuania was visiting. I think mainly people from Israel go there. And no Lithuania was visiting, and one guide, he was very, you know, interested that I came, and he wanted to explain me anything. I was just shocked by the machine of genocide that was created there, just the mass graves and just the faces of the people, that just a horrible thing happened there. And I don't think it's just, they know it's acknowledged officially, but nobody wants to talk about it, because I think it's hard for a nation, for the collective soul of the nation, to realize that, you know, we were mass murderers. I think that's very hard to accept.
It is very
something
hard.
that Austria or Germany has done, you know, just German or Austrian society, for example.
Well, Germany's addressed it, you know, I think as best as it could probably be addressed. Can they do better? Sure. But I mean, they've gone very, very far. And to me, they're the model of what Lithuania should do. But what I was going to say, if you know, I wanted to end this on a little bit a note of hope, because I just came back from a trip to Lithuania, and my book is getting translated into Lithuanian with a new title, Storm in the Land of Rain, Vetra Lietaus šalyje. So it's a big, big step forward that a publisher came and decided to publish the book. Because I used to joke with my friends, the book is going to get translated in every language but Lithuanian. So I was very happy that that the book is getting translated in Lithuanian. And when I was in Lithuania, you know, I was there invited by the Olga Lengel Institute to talk about my grandfather to teachers teaching about the Holocaust. And these are not Jews, they're just regular high school teachers from all across Lithuania. And they listened to my story really with a very open mind, open heart, which gave me so much hope. And a few of them have asked me already to Zoom into their classrooms and talk about this. So that has given me so much hope. And I'm noticing that kind of your average Lithuanian is open to this and willing to talk about it and look into it. It's kind of more just at the official level. And I think, you know, in Chicago here, they're a little bit more rigid. It's called like a long distance nationalism, where they're just stuck, you know. And whereas in Lithuania, like, I guess because they're there, like they can, like, they're a little bit more flexible about this. So I found the message was received almost a little bit more easily in Lithuania than here in Chicago.
That's really interesting. I think like you say, that point of how the diaspora kind of stays stuck in like these ideas of nationalism, whereas people who are actually living in the country, because they don't have to struggle so hard with maintaining their identity and keeping, you know, true to like who they are and not losing themselves in this other country where they've emigrated to, then, you know, they're willing to be like, okay, like things are discovered in history and we have to change kind of the way that we're revisiting what's going on. And I think that sometimes that's like, I have felt challenged here in the US, like sometimes to look at some of the Venezuelan history, or especially a figure such as Simón Bolívar, and we may be able to talk about that later in a different episode. But sometimes we have to look at, well, like what, there was some contentious relationships there with some countries, and you know, what was going on, and you, if you're, you know, me as a Venezuelan here in the US, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I want to go into that too much, because like, you know, this is, and also I'm probably ready to spit out a bunch of excuses, but it's like, okay, I'm kind of afraid to go deeper into that. Whereas someone in Venezuela might be like, well, yeah, let's look at it, like what's going on, because they don't have to struggle with that identity, you know, being stuck in not wanting to offend, you know, the motherland or anything like that. And you know, have I, on that vein, and I do have an additional question to this one that I'm gonna do now that I mentioned the diaspora. Like when your book was published, did you experience any like negative, like any harassment by part of the Lithuanian diaspora, like in Chicago? Like, did they go like, hey, like, why are you, you know, ruffling these feathers? Like, what's going on? Or were they like, oh, okay, like, how could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, many Lithuanians seem to be very angry over this here in Chicago and in Lithuania too, like the super patriots. And I did get some hate mail, and I did get a death threat. I didn't take it seriously, but still, it was not fun to get. You know, and I'm on Facebook, and I'll some people will get nasty on Facebook, and I'll eventually block them, so that takes care of the problem for me. But also, there are Lithuanians who are just afraid to read this. Not afraid, but like they're unwilling. Like they'll continue to defend Jonas Noreika, but they haven't read the book. And I'll be like, have you read the book? Because it's pretty clearly laid out there. And they're like, oh no, I would never read that. I'm like, well, it's hard to talk to you. So it's kind of like this cold shoulder also approach, you know, kind of turning their backs to this whole thing, and you know, keeping their heads in the sand, because it's easier for them that way. I've lost a couple friends over this. On the positive side, I have gotten some support. You know, there are Lithuanians who can look at this and not fall apart and fall into a puddle. You know, they're very rational and very strong and very able to deal with this. So there are Lithuanians like that too.
That's good to hear that, but it's painful, you know, it's painful that, you know, it's like, you can't argue with the truth, with the facts that are there, and it's painful, and that it's like intertwined with the part of your history, of your family's history, of your national identity, that is painful, but like you have to deal with it. And like I think that kind of shutting down, it also reminds me of you know, the two of us that live here in the United States, that it's like, it's a little bit of that parallel of what we're having right now here in the US with some of the discourse that's going on, with acknowledging the history and like how these historical dynamics are still echoing in the present, and it gets super politicized here, and it's like, oh well, like if you don't say this one thing, then it's like you're, you know, you're out of the whatever group, or you have states like passing legislation that are basically trying to sanitize history and say this didn't happen, or these qualities aren't inherent in what's going on in the United States, and they're just trying to like to wash out history. And it's like, it's painful, but we have to be collectively mature and resilient to deal with it if we actually want to become better and we want to move forward. So I think that is such an interesting dynamic, but it's also something that at least those of us here that are living in the United States, we're kind of dealing with that. Like I see some legislation passing here in Iowa that it's like, well, we're not gonna talk about like X, Y, and Z, like divisive concepts. Like it's just like, okay, like everything can be a divisive concept. You just have to talk about it and really get to the truth and get to the facts. And that brings me to something here that you mentioned on your website, as far as like the questions that your book addresses. And one of your questions says specifically, why are some European countries still in denial about their role in the Holocaust? And something really interesting happened to me that when I went to Budapest in Hungary, I took like a 7-hour trip. I just like took a bus from Lithuania. No, was it from Lithuania? No, it was not. I'm confusing my dates. From Austria in 2019. So I took a bus and I went to Hungary, and for like 7 hours, and I took this tour, and they, walked us around the entire city. And then the tour guide was like, listen, we're going to show you this memorial, but this is a very controversial memorial. And I'm like, really? Okay, what's going on? And so it's this memorial that was built in Budapest on Liberty Square in like 2014. And like it was so weird, and the fact that like it was basically built, approved and built like in the middle of the night, and like nobody knew too much about it. And so like all of a sudden it was built. And then
what is the memorial?
So it's called the Memorial for Victims of the German Occupation. And so it was apparently, created in memory of the German invasion of Hungary. And it's located in Budapest Liberty Square. And so the way that it was built, it was like a stone statue of the Archangel Gabriel, which is like the national symbol of Hungary, being attacked by an eagle, and that the eagle was like symbolizes Germany, because like the German coat of arms had the eagle, and it's like and then like Hungary is this angel that like didn't do anything, and like we were just attacked by these evil Germans. And so the Hungarian Jews were like, what is this? This is an outrage. Like this is incredible. And so there was like a huge backlash from them protesting this monument that is there. So when you go to the monument, it's actually very moving, because there's like suitcases and pictures and letters from Hungarian Jews, like their families, and kind of like their mementos and the different things that were part of their families that were killed because of Hungary's role during the Nazi occupation, and because of this collaboration that they did. And the fact that they were building this monument, and this was like on the like right after the election of Viktor Orban. And so like that was completely, very controversial at that time, because it's like, what is this guy symbolizing? Like, what is going on? And the fact that this was approved this way. So you see along the bottom of the monument, you see all of this. It's very moving. And every night, according to the tour guide, there's like the police come and like take away like all of that stuff. And then what they did, because like they would just take it away, and then people would come back and put their stuff again there to remind them, and then they would take it away again, and back and forth. And so what they also did to this monument was that they built some fountains that would like rise up. And so when the fountains are on, and like it's like on a timer, then you cannot see like the mementos and the things that people leave for their families. Like, it is messed up. Like, that is a messed up monument, and it's kind of like, it's an indication of this like reluctance to like really want to deal with it, and how in tapping into this nationalist, like, let's get our country, you know, back to being whatever again, you know, and we've heard that everywhere. There's this like tendency to be like, we've done no wrong. Nobody remembers that we were actually totally innocent. And like, how could you, like, if you say that we did anything, you're like, you're saying that our country's wrong and you're not really being a patriot. And it's like, I don't think so. Like, you have to stay true to what is reality, to what is fact. So so that for me, I remember that very vividly, because I was like, wow, this is really messed up. And just seeing the just the pieces of letters and pictures and shoes and suitcases of like, you know, survivors and people who didn't survive, and people who, you know, from that chain link bridge, people were thrown in there because they were Jewish, and like, it was this doesn't happen just like, oh, I didn't see it, who knows how that happened. It's like, no, obviously there was an entire machine behind this, that was allowing, enabling, or empowering this to happen. So that question, I think that I would like to just get some of your comments. I wanted to share that because when I saw your book, I was like, oh my God. And when I saw this question, I was like, yes, like, that is it's still very difficult for these governments and for people to grapple with. And the fact that this monument was built like in 2014. So I don't know if you had any other comments or insight into that.
I did not know about this monument. I loved hearing about it, and thank you for informing me of it. My book is coming out in Hungarian and Polish. So there's that. It's very similar in Lithuania, in Panere. Their original monument said something very similar, that it was, you know, German victims of the German invasion, something like that. And it did not have the word Jews. Like, the word Jews was not on there. And instead they call them Soviet citizens. So part of the whitewashing problem was that the word Jew was not used. They were not allowed to have their own identity in being the victims of the Nazis, and the Lithuanians and the Soviets kind of appropriated what happened to the Jews and took over the victimhood to themselves.
That's
and
insane.
So
that's crazy.
And this is a problem. This is a big problem, because Lithuania also likes to play the victim country. They were a victim of the Soviet occupation and the Nazi occupation. But funny thing about the Nazi occupation, in Lithuania anyway, there were only like 600 Nazis that came in, and 220,000 Jews were killed. So, and Lithuanians had guns. Lithuanians had guns, and not, you know how many Nazis were killed? Zero Nazis killed.
Yeah.
As I understand, it was one of the highest extermination rates in Europe carried at the time, like 96% of all Jews were
highest percentage. Highest percentage. If you were a Jew in Lithuania, you had very, very little chance of surviving.
Jeez.
As we're coming to a close with the podcast, as we certainly don't want to abuse your time, Silvia. I was wondering, and this is one of the most impressive things for me about your testimony, your research, your experience, that you are this proud Lithuanian, growing up in Chicago, going since you were a little girl, Lithuanian school on Saturdays, and you said something in Hard Talk that was really, I don't know, powerful for me, that you said that you felt that you lost your identity. I think this program was back in April, but I was wondering how you felt then and how you feel now. That do you feel that you have regained your identity, seeing that situation has improved, and you are, like you're saying, met some open-minded Lithuanians in Lithuania? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I feel like my lowest point with this was I just had such shame and embarrassment over being Lithuanian when I really heard about this. You know, it's painful to hear about Lithuania's role in the Holocaust. It's traumatic, I think, for Lithuanian to hear it. But it kind of, the trauma doubles to realize how it's being covered up so purposefully too. Like that just adds another layer to it that makes it so difficult. So I truly felt like I lost my Lithuanian identity, and I really felt like I was at sea over this. I would say today I'm starting to come back out from that, and I'm starting to regain a different sort of Lithuanian identity. And to me, I've always been a patriot. It's, to me, being patriotic is looking at the truth and discussing what happened so that we don't do it again. And if you don't discuss it and really understand what happened, there is a big danger that it could happen again. So it's very important to me to really look into what happened, as horrible and traumatic as it is. And I think it's not good to live to have this fairy tale version of what happened during the Holocaust in Lithuania, from the Lithuanians' point of view. I think it's a much more healthy approach to see what happened and take ownership of what the Lithuanians did. That is the mature, responsible thing to do. And by refusing it, it's a very childish way of looking at history to me. And so I'm still beginning to feel more patriotic about it now, but I'm kind of trying to redefine the word patriotism and what that means, and giving it its a different angle to what it means to be patriotic.
I guess I cannot resist the temptation of asking, would you even consider moving to Lithuania to live permanently?
Well, I'm getting my Lithuanian passport, I think. So this is a big, if I get it, because maybe they'll still refuse me. We'll see it. I finally sent in the last document I had to do. I don't know. I would not rule it out, I guess. I've just turned 60. I'm nearing retirement. I don't know. Who knows what it's not like I would say no. I mean, the American life is very nice, but
no,
I don't know.
I bet Šiauliai is very different from Chicago. You know that, so yeah.
It is. I mean, Vilnius is different from Šiauliai, so.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that'd be so interesting. You know, I went to Lithuania for just I don't know, I think I was there for like a week and a half, but I definitely like made my time of it. And I loved Vilnius, and I went to Molėtai as well. And that was a lot of fun too. Delicious food and nice people, and very cold. It was so cold. Like it was literally like 55 degrees in like the middle of August. And I'm like, what is happening here? And it was like rainy, and then Jorge's like, whatever, land of rain. Like, what are you gonna do? So it's like, all right. So it's built in there. But yes, so this takes us to the end of our episode. I just want to say thank you so much once again, Silvia, for coming on and for sharing your story, for writing the book, and it seems like there's like a lot more exciting things happening with the different translations. That it seems like they're gonna do a little bit of a change in the name, and so we do hope that you get your passport, and so then that will be good. So yeah, we'll definitely be on the lookout for it. I have your website here, which is just silviafoti.com. And where else can people find you?
Well, the book is The Nazi's Granddaughter, and it's a memoir, and that can be found, anywhere you buy a book. Amazon seems to be the largest place, but if you don't want to go to Amazon, which I know some people don't, Barnes & Noble, even your local bookstore, it's in libraries. If the bookstore you go in might not have it, all you have to do is ask them to order it. They can order it for you. So very easy to get.
Perfect. And para los radioescuchas o los podescuchas más bien en español, está la edición en español. Mi abuelo, el general Storm, héroe o criminal nazi, lo estoy viendo aquí en Amazon. It is on Amazon. I am seeing here the translation into Spanish. So that is also available there. Well, great. Just look it up, look up Silvia and follow the story. And once again, thank you everybody for listening. You can find us at Contraelite1 on Twitter and on Instagram. We are on anchor.fm/Contraelite, and hopefully you will be seeing us on YouTube as well. So thank you once again. I'll let you all say goodbye and then we'll wrap it up.
Goodbye. It was a pleasure to be here.
Gracias a todos. Thank you so much.
Gracias por escuchar Contraélite. Síguenos en nuestras redes sociales, por Twitter o Instagram, @Contraelite1.